Hello and welcome to the Ford Brain podcast. I'm Somil.
And I'm Ali. Today, we're going to talk about why operations are the new competitive advantage. So, Somil, tell me about a bit more about that. How is it
Yeah,
that we think operations are the new competitive advantage?
yeah. So I think if we, again, as I like to go back to history, because history always has a lesson or two to teach us, operations have always been a source of competitive advantage. Whether we look at Toyota and the Toyota production system, when we look at the Ford Motor Company, we look at General Motors. If you look at any large organization that has made any significant progress, it has always been about the operations. And I think the importance of operations as a competitive strategy go back even further in the history. If you look at even the times of Alexander the Great or Napoleon the Great, they always have won their campaigns on the basis of having excellent supply chains and excellent operations. And we also see counter examples of companies who had great ideas but who could not have great operations, a great supply chain, and they could never survive the test of time. So I think operations have always been, but I think now we are taking operations for granted a bit. I think it's time we take a relook into the importance and of our operations.
Exactly. And I think with the fact that now a lot of your operations can be automated, a lot of AI models and agents coming in can actually create a huge difference in how efficient you can be. So there is a threat of, especially if you are a very operations heavy company, there is a threat of companies with a much lower cost base coming in and competing with you. The barrier to entry into the services business specifically is way, way smaller. So we will see through operations a lot more Uber moments going on and happening in the markets. And that's something that's very important to pay attention to. And that's why looking at your operations and turning your COOs from the cost centers to the revenue centers, the competitive centers, is an important aspect for companies.
Absolutely, I agree, and I really like the way you mentioned, because if you look at the way operations is perceived right now, it's seen as something that has a fixed cost. It's seen as something that has a certain level of productivity and certain kind of structure. A lot of operations is driven from a structural point of view, and I would really expect to see companies who will just disrupt that entire assumption and bring more flexible models. Especially, I think you spoke about agents and AI. I think that is the future, because the question that assumptions that these new companies will challenge is, okay, do I really need these kind of processes? Do I really need these kind of systems? Do I really need to go through all of these different stages and planning to get things done? And that would exactly be the Uber moment. I think Uber changed the industry overnight. So we can see that a lot more disruption coming from outside the industry if industries if companies are not vigilant.
Yeah. And I think it is even more important for the service oriented businesses or companies who want to be uh, a more service provider, more service providers, more solution providers than just product and hardware providers. But let's take a step back, think about why is it that the current challenges, what are the current challenges? Why is it that people are not really leveraging their operations as a competitive
Yeah,
advantage?
I think to some extent over the last so one big factor that happened was itification of business. For the last 20-30 years, we see a lot more operations and especially the business operations being translated, communicated, and perceived in terms of IT. So three major things have happened because of that. The first one is we see, rather than lean operations, now we have very complicated monoliths who have taken over people's productivity. I think it's a fight for productivity for people. They spend a lot of time documenting things, entering things into registers. That's what these ERP. So the bureaucracy around the systems or monolithic systems, I think that's huge. They're very rigid. We're very slow to change, carry a huge maintenance cost, and I don't think they add a lot of value when it comes to adaptability or changing the business models. I think the second factor that is at play here is the hierarchical, the organizational hierarchy. I think over the years, organizations have tried to restructure themselves to become more complex and more rigid in terms of hierarchies and what people do. And as a result, it's very difficult to change. Even if you change the systems and the processes, it's very difficult to change people's mindsets because they are very much into working in their own silo. And also the second thing is they are very much become, I mean, they really do not have the awareness or knowledge about what's happening outside the scope. So the cross company, cross value stream kind of knowledge and skill sets are not there. People are very much focused on what they do. And I think what it results in is a third factor is a lot of planning based execution. So I think a large significant proportion of organization time is being spent on planning and then translating those plans into operations. It's a really, really slow and I would say not very productive, not very smart way of working, especially when you look at operations and its importance, the importance that you have with respect to agility and adaptability. I think the planning and the systems and bureaucracy is really killing it.
Yeah, I think that we go back to our usual villain, the ERPs, who have been grown and grown out of proportion. They're not built to operate companies. They're built to basically control companies, to plan for companies and store information for companies and make the bigger company compliant to the systems they want. But then they're not built for operations. They cannot help you win battles. They're basically just foundations that are now too rigid to move. Whereas you actually need, if I use analogy of like rockets and rocket ships going to the moon, if you want to go to the moon, I'm inspired by the recent SpaceX video that I just watched. You need mobile launch pads nowadays. You don't need giant buildings. You need to be able to do things from different places. You need to be able to reuse things the same way as the space frontier is trying to do that, to just move things around, ship things out, capture some of it back. That agility and be able to move things around is super important, but you can't do that from a giant castle that you've built in your capital, because that's just too complicated.
Yeah.
So how do we solve this? Go ahead.
To quote Dark Knight, you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. I think that's what's happening to the ERPs. I think they started out as heroes, but I think they have lived long enough that now they're killing productivity.
Exactly. So they basically have the heroes have become too old and too cumbersome, so they're basically holding everyone else back. All right, but then how do we what do we see with the difference? I think that the agents and AI agents, the movement, the productivity that comes from them. What do you see that just recently Sam Altman, I think it's a bit of an exaggeration, but he was talking about he can see in the next few years that there's the first 1 billion one-person company will show up somewhere, and everything else is done through AI agents. I think it's a bit of an exaggeration, but the level of productivity that comes from that is huge. So for people who don't know, can you talk about what is the agentic transformation? What do we talk about when we talk about AI agents?
Absolutely. So agentic transformation is the revolution that I think is already brewing. It's poised to take over the world very, very soon. Because the way, if you look at the pace of change, I would say 10 years could be reasonable. I mean, things are just moving too fast for any of us to comprehend. But agentic transformation really means that rather than building your operations into monolithic processes and rules and workflows, you distribute those operations into smaller bits of decisions to be made and actions to be done and milestones to be achieved, and you give that to the agents who understands your context, who understands the guardrails, who understands the limitations, and then executes them, and also report it back to you how you have done. If I could, let's say, had a magic wand, and if I could change, let's say, an order to cash process of an organization into small sequences, small sets of decisions, actions, and workflows, I really need those large systems. Because if I have powerful enough agents, and if I really have the contextual information and enough intelligence, the agents will be able to pretty much do everything that needs to be done. They can automatically follow the rules. They can automatically adapt when the rules change. They can take very intelligent decisions given the context, and they can also report to you. And they can also help you plan the next iteration. So everything that we are doing in these large monolith systems, you really don't need any of it. All of that function, of course, if you just if you're like one of those people who feels comfortable to have something solid in front of you, then it's a different story. But most people who are just trying to just get things done, you don't need that. I think that's what I would say is the agentic transformation. It's a new way of looking at operations as a set of activities that needs to be done. Agents is a set of smart virtual workforce who can do it and then enforce and report and do everything really.
And of course, there is a prerequisite for that. You can and you should look at your operations as a set of smaller tasks to be done, right?
Absolutely.
And actions to be taken.
Yes. I think that's one of the most important things, because that's where the framing comes into picture. How intelligently can we frame our operations? How intelligently can we re-engineer or reinvent our operations from a point of view of being executed from agents? I think that level of smartness or intelligence has to be brought in by us. But after that, I think agents can take over.
Yeah, I have a small beef with the name transformation, because in my mind, these kind of things, operational changes, small operational changes that we do, if you start decomposing your operation into smaller things, you're not really doing giant transformations. It has a bit of a bad rep, the name transformation in industry nowadays, but I don't want people to get scared of it. We call it transformation because it transforms your business, but in reality, it's not one of those 5-year projects that never ends. It is actually much, much faster. And that actually goes back to the benefits of the agentic transformation as well. Speed is one of the key things. We usually say, you and I talk about what is the goal of what our product is to get from event to decision to action in a matter of milliseconds. That's where you see the value. And that's where you can act by dividing and breaking down everything into smaller things. You can achieve that and work with that. But also, with having these broken down fractal of your business and thinking of your business as a fractal of all the actions you take, all the operations you run, you can very quickly, in a scalable manner, adapt to whatever happens outside, like demand, like supply changes, disruptions, everything. And to me, it also, in reality, this is the best and more tangible way of leveraging your data and leveraging automation and so on. With all of that said, how can it actually drive competitive advantage? What do you think?
That's the fundamental question, right?
Yeah.
So there are many different ways. I think one of the things that most organizations around the world are trying to do is to change their business model, to make their business models more value driven, to make their business model more customer driven, to really make the business models more lean and more embedded into the customer's lifestyle or their life cycle. So when that happens, I think the degree of success that you can achieve is through the strength of your operations, and more adaptability and flexibility you have in operations. I think you spoke about speed, you spoke about scalability, you spoke about intelligence. I think there's another dimension is reliability. How can I trust that if I want something to be done in a certain way, it is or it will be done in that way, and then I will know about it? after it is done, or if it's not done, I will not know about it as well. I think it's that reliability or trust that you need when you're trying out the business model. The second thing that we are seeing is, even when you look at business model innovation, and I think the concept started almost 20 years ago. But today, if you look at even the business model's life cycle is shrinking. You can't run with a single business model for more than a few years. You have to keep disrupting yourself, keep coming with new business models. So when that happens, and then when you handle the variation within the business model, you need a very strong operations. I think that's what delivers the competitive advantage. It's about you able to leverage any opportunity or any threat that comes your way in your advantage. That's how you build competitive advantage. The second part is also how do we bring more agility. One aspect of speed is how you react to events externally. The other aspect of speed is also to learn from your mistakes, to learn from the experience, and change the way you work. I think that kind of a feedback that comes from the results of operation. So, what when you look at the total experience of that a customer has from your company or from your brand, it's not just your product, it's not just your marketing, it's everything. When you look at all the touch points, total experience that you're delivering, how do you learn from that? How do you change based on that? How do you adapt based on that as a company? I think that is a second, more internal agility that organizations need to build. So what one way we look at it is that, of course, it's very difficult to, if you just look at from a people driven operation, it's very difficult to expect people to change their ways of working all the time. But if we come up with an operating model where you have agents who are actually doing the execution and are more easier to change and adapt, and then you can have a very different role that people can play in terms of shaping that operations and shaping the organization. I think that's where we can also leverage the human intelligence, because irrespective of what people say or what Sam Altman says, I think people are still relevant, because people who determine value
100%.
together, the value comes from the exchange relationship, right? So we can we can actually, by delegating or by executing operations through agents, we can make a lot more sense of human intelligence and human empathy and the relationships and the connect, and make products more meaningful for people.
Yeah,
I think we
exactly.
can make things more humane from as organizations. So it is a win-win.
Yeah, I think I would actually say that the future is more hybrid than fully autonomous. There are quite a lot of things that require human touch, right? Right now, interacting with AI is a novel thing, but I would expect people would want to talk to other people at some point in their life. So human interactions will become, unless there's some super intelligence coming in and changes everything, I don't know. But I would also say that the fact that you can't really expect to, now we're going to lease our products and now we're service oriented, that's not going to work, right? You need to think about, as you said, the service experience is where your operations and agents can make a huge difference, make a big difference in how you operate, how you create an experience for your customers, for your employees, or whoever is getting the service you're providing. I think that's the most important thing that this provides, and also the fact that these agents at some point can be assistants to people is another angle. So it is obvious that both of us think that agentic operations are the future of intelligence and intelligent operations. So if you want to wrap up with some final words of wisdom, how can a company leverage agentic operations and agentic business, BizOps, as we call it, to stay ahead?
Yeah, I think it would be, in my view, to go for the agentic transformation without getting too hung about the word transformation. It's
Yes,
really
please.
about reinventing your operation. I think we have to start rethinking and challenging the assumptions that we have had for so many years. It's more about breaking, like what Elon Musk says. I start from the first principles. what is it that needs to be done, and I think, and why it needs to be done. I think that's where we have to probably start building the first set of agents, and then start building, slowly building the entire operational strategy and infrastructure on top of it. I think that's how organizations can leverage right now. There is, every organization has a different strategy, but maybe if you want to start small, you can always start in one area of your business, try to transform that very, very quickly, and then slowly move to adjacencies and start scaling it up. So many different ways of scaling it. I think it's time to already start thinking about transformation, because either you choose transformation or you choose disruption. I don't see any third option here.
Transformation with a small t, not a big T.
Yes, transformation with a small t.
But I think you said it. You said it right. I was doing, as you know, a presentation about supply chain a while back. I think that basically the way I see it, if you really want to move towards deploying agents in your operations, first you need to start thinking about how do I decompose this operation into smaller pieces, right? And then pick one piece. Then you do what we discussed in our previous episode, and here's a plug. How do I really define a next best action strategy? How do I define what needs to be done from a first principle perspective? And then when you have that framework, you can start thinking about, okay, what are these actions can be done by humans? These decisions can be done by humans or agents. And then you basically take one at a time. And over time, with small steps, you've made huge transformations. So a lot of transformations with small t end up in a big transformation with a big T without really you noticing it.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well.
Exactly. So, and then I think what we would say as the final message is that in a digital world and a service-oriented world, in a world that is becoming more and more complex, let's see what happens next week, but also unpredictable, I think operations should be your ultimate competitive advantage. And that's it.
Absolutely. So this was great, and thank you for listening to us. Please do share your comments and your reflections, your inputs, really valuable to us. And thanks for being a part of this. And see you next time.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to talking more about agents in the coming weeks.